Hello, everybody. Welcome to the David Kurten Show. It's a tough time at the moment in the United Kingdom with what's happening with the Labour government, but also with horrendous crimes going on, not least what happened in Southport in July 2024. We were not told all of the facts about the case until last week, from the time of recording this, when there was the trial due to start, but the trial didn't happen because the perpetrator, the mass murderer Axel Rudakubana, pleaded guilty. So then the sentencing happened just a few days afterwards. And then we heard more details about what happened on the day of the mass murders, which were very, very difficult to hear. And I haven't said much myself because it was so disturbing and distressing. I know a lot of people have commented on it, saying what they feel, because this is just a time of raw emotion for people in this country, knowing that 3 beautiful young English girls have been killed by a beast. Other people have used it to make political capital and to say really ridiculous things, which I don't agree with either. But someone who is always a man of the highest integrity, and I can vouch for, and I met him on the freedom rallies back in 2020, is the journalist Lewis Brackpool. And it's a delight to welcome Lewis to the show today to talk about these things, even though they're quite heavy. But Lewis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you so much for the introduction. That was very kind of you. Thank you.
No, really, really good to have you on the show. You know, it was always fantastic to see you back in the day on the freedom marches. There we were acting because we were acting against tyranny there, weren't we? We were fighting against lockdowns. We were fighting against forced or coerced injections, but you always gave some light, in the darkness there because of your character. And then, you always reported things in a way which is very fair, very knowledgeable, very intelligent, but also lifted people up. So, it's always good to talk to you, Lewis.
Oh, thank you, David. There's such kind words. And, echoing that of yourself, I remember first meeting you on the freedom rallies and seeing you with the heritage flag as well, flying that high. So, and this tyranny, it doesn't go away. It just, manifests in a different form. So we're always constantly fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, now we got a heavy topic today because I don't just like to call it a topic because real people have been affected. Horribly what happened in Southport in July 2024. We know who the killer was, the mass murderer. But I'm just going to show a picture here because we were presented in the media with this image of a 10-year-old boy who was supposedly Welsh and Christian and a choir boy, and who was an actor who played in Doctor Who. And it was a big shock when actually we found out that this is what he looks like now. But we weren't given this picture of him until the trial began in January. So there's 6 months where he was being presented in a completely different way to the reality. Whereas in some cases, the police just put out, the picture of the perpetrator. If it was like sort of someone who was white, who had said something on social media, you see their pictures instantly, immediately everywhere. But with this person, they sort of, didn't portray him as he actually is. Or why do you think that they did this? And what's the purpose behind that? And should they have actually shown his picture from the beginning as he is now?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't suppose you remember the case of James Bulger in Liverpool, where the 2 children kidnapped a young boy and tortured him on a railway track. And the media ran headlines calling them monsters, showed their images being taken to the police station, having their mug shots taken, and it was plastered across every press within the UK and international press, because the case was just so, it was just, I hate to use the word unique but you know what I mean when I use the term unique. It was such a dark, horrific time, yet the particular story was so unheard of that the press just completely ran with it. Now, you know, some people are going to, you know, pick holes in what I've just said and say, well, the press isn't the same as how it used to be. I kind of disagree. They just kind of work between certain guidelines. But with the case of this, we seem to see a lot of horrific cases, whether it be stabbings, murders, anything relating to crime. And if the perpetrator is of certain communities, the councils or the police, the government, the media seem to run rings around trying to keep community cohesion intact. You saw the cases with the grooming gangs because of the perpetrators being of Pakistani origin predominantly, and the victims being that of white working class girls. With that as the essence of the crime, what you're seeing is the reason why all of these are being, I guess, covered up. You could use that term, covered up.
Yeah.
The reason why is because of community cohesion. You know, it's the liberal narrative that has to take precedent within media, within government, within everything. So I don't think it's at all. I think it's expected now, unfortunately, for the media, for the government, for the police, to almost withhold information if this information contradicts the liberal ethos. So that's my view. I'm happy to be challenged on it, but that seems the takeaway from not only this Ruda Cabana case, but previous cases as well, the grooming gang scandal and various others.
I think you're absolutely right, because I think there is a really big problem in this country with what you could call migrant crime. And it gets covered up, and then the police don't take the right action at the right time, which leads everyone to say, well, we have a system in this country of two-tier policing and two-tier justice. And another case that springs to mind, you know, you mentioned the Bolger case. That was in the 80s or 90s. I can't remember the exact year, but it was, you know, over 20 years ago. But more recently, the Finsbury Park mosque attack. Now, okay,
Yes.
that was a terrorist attack, but the perpetrator, I can't remember his first name, is John Osborne or someone Osborne. But his name was released immediately. His picture was released immediately before there was any trial that happened. And he was immediately decried, you know, rightly, as a terrorist, as someone who needed to face the full force of the law. But in the case of Ruda Cabana here in Southport, there was all kinds of suppression of anybody saying the same thing, of treating him in the same way as the Finsbury Park attacker. And indeed, anyone who did speak out against it, you know, who suggested, oh, maybe it was because he was a convert to Islam. You know, I know various people have been talking about this, but what we do know for certain is that he had an Al Qaeda training manual, you know, which is a hint. But if you mention that before the trial in January, you were at risk of getting a knock at the door from the police, and even then being taken into custody and held in remand. And now we have what I would say are political prisoners in the UK who've just said something about this incident, related to the incident, on social media. And so we do have two-tier justice in this country, I think. And what do you think about that?
I totally agree with you. There's two things that stand out in my mind. Number one, the mainstream press actually challenging Keir Starmer and saying in a press conference, saying, actually, you could have, the public could have, or you specifically could have disclosed more information. And it was told to Keir Starmer very bluntly by the mainstream press, and then asked him, why didn't you? And of course, he pivoted. We now know that Prevent, the counter-terrorism organization, was on their radar 3 times because he was looking at, you know, genocidal material, and of course terrorist attacks, especially the one from 2017 in London. You know, he was viewing this content at a very young age and looking at it in school grounds as well. The other thing was, yes, a lot of people felt like that the police were going to come knock at their door if they were to speak about this case, in fear of contempt of court. which to me, I think we're one of the very few countries that has this silly law when it comes to reporting on court cases. However, I did a report where I was emailing Tommy Robinson from his prison cell, and he was in Belmarsh at the time, and then was being moved to Woodhill. And I, as a journalist, instead of relying on people on social media or his admin team that have taken over his social media account whilst he's serving his time in prison, I thought I'd reach out personally to try and figure out what his condition is like. And he disclosed that during his time in Belmarsh, Axel Ruda-Cabana was 2 cells away from him.
Wow.
And he explained how he had a job and he attended what we now know is a multi-faith worship service. To what religion? I mean, it's pretty ambiguous, but I think with the Al-Qaeda training manual and such, I think there is a bit of a hint. However, we don't know that for certain. So I'm going to refrain from, saying anything is concrete, and it is just an allegation for now. However, he was explaining to me that he Axel Ruda-Cabana, had more freedom under his conditions in Belmarsh than Tommy Robinson does in Woodhill, which is extraordinary. Now, you don't have to agree with Robinson or be a fan or be a super fan with Robinson to understand that this is a perversion of the courts, the justice system, and just how it all works, really. It just needs a complete overhaul and a look at. So it's quite extraordinary.
It's not going to happen under Labour, though, is it?
No.
I mean, they are, exacerbating the situation. I mean, again, I would agree with you. I don't have any connection with Tommy Robinson myself, but clearly at the moment he's a political prisoner. Just for showing a film, and he's been put in prison in solitary confinement for 18 months for contempt of court, when most people, if they're guilty or found guilty of contempt of court, they get a little fine or a slap on the wrist or something. But so clearly they're going way overboard to put him, take him out of the public sphere. Whereas Ruda-Cabana, as you say, he's got more freedom in prison, more privileges in prison than someone who shouldn't even be there. It's completely ridiculous, this whole system. But I'll just turn my attention to something slightly different, because what I also found disturbing after the trial began, what didn't happen after he pled guilty, is that then there was an effort, I guess, by behavioral psychologists in order to deflect from the fact that he was a mass murderer, just someone who's evil, and then create other narratives like this one. Yes. You remember this headline? I just thought this was laughable. I didn't say anything about it at the time, but they tried to blame it on Amazon because Amazon sells knives, and he bought a knife, and the knife he bought from Amazon was used in the murders. This is just laughable, as well as being an insult to the families of the girls who were killed, isn't it?
Absolutely. That, it seems to me like the behavioral nudge units are out in full force again, and are being utilized in the media sphere. I mean, anybody can grab a knife from their kitchen, for crying out loud. Everyone has access to these kinds of tools from their own kitchen. The fact that this was blamed on Amazon is unbelievable. I mean, it's just such an insult, like you said. But it never goes into the underlying problem of either mass migration and potentially integration as well, and the problems that we have there, because the state aren't exactly, well, the British state hasn't exactly had a good track record with trying to build a good system with either integration nor with the continuation of mass migration. So it's one of those things, isn't it? It's another pivot. It's look, divert your attention away from the issue to another issue. Let's create another issue and then utilize that. And I think swiftly, Yvette Cooper decided, right, we're gonna ban or add another restriction onto Amazon when purchasing kitchen knives for you to cook your food with at home. It's an insult. It really just is an insult at this point.
Yeah, well, they're doing everything to deflect from the fact that this was the son of a migrant. Whatever the background was of his father with the Rwandan genocide, we don't know for sure, because that's something else that we're not allowed to talk about, or they're severely discouraging people from talking about that and looking into it. Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper are not giving any straight answers about this in Parliament, and they're blaming either the far right or they're blaming kitchen knives. And something else from someone who's usually sensible, Peter Hitchens. He wrote a piece in the weekend blaming cannabis, or saying, that it was potentially because of cannabis that he did this. I mean, that's another completely ridiculous idea when, obviously, he's just an evil person. And this diverts us from actually dealing with the real issues.
Yeah. And, I'm not a fan of cannabis, and, the legalization of all of that. But Hitchens has lost it with that. I mean, I've never heard of a Welsh choir boy smoking up a 10 ounce or whatever, and or a 10 bag, and then having fantasies about genocide. I've never heard of that before, personally. So I think it's a bit of a stretch to suggest that is the reason why we have so much violent crime in the UK, or the reason why Axel Rudikabana had these fantasies and was looking at all this material. So yeah, I find it very, very difficult to believe such a claim from Hitchens.
Yeah, I mean, me too. To be fair, he is very good on some things, but on this, I think he's got it way wrong. And again, that's an insult to the families of the victims. But someone who I think is closer to the mark, and this is from the Daily Skeptic, and here's an article that's there today. Southport attacker Axel Rudikabana had declared the need for white genocide. Is this why the authorities were so adamant it wasn't a terrorist offence? Now, if he declared that he wants white genocide to happen, then this would be a terrorist offence. But this is the kind of thing that is being suppressed. What can we do to get this kind of information out there and to get the people in positions of power to acknowledge this?
It's a good question. This report saying that Axel wanted fantasized and thought about wanting a white genocide. I think it makes a lot more sense now to the possibility of government and police negligence with disclosing facts, and to call this a terrorist motive. It's fascinating, isn't it? It goes back to the liberal ethos. You can't. If you say something like that, then that discounts the definition of what would be known as a terrorist. It's fascinating, isn't it? But to get this out, I think there are two options really now. One of them is probably not as effective as the other. But the one that is the least effective, I would say, is to, of course, email your representative, which is the least effective, because now it's just copy and paste. Unless you're potentially someone maybe like Rupert Lowe, who seems to be taking this quite very, very seriously and actually doing a lot more than any other MP has done for generations. So hats off to him for continuing what he's doing. The other one is to push commentators, to push journalists, to push media personalities that go on regular shows and talk about these sorts of subjects, and just to add a little bit of pressure, not nothing malicious, but to maybe even utilize that Daily Skeptic article and to go through and just to make sure that you're leaving no stone unturned, and just pushing that towards commentators that go on shows such as GB News, Talk TV, all of these mainstream broadcasters. So I think that's probably the most effective way. And it's sad, really, that those are the only two ways that I can think of.
Yeah.
Because in America, they have the First Amendment,
Right.
whereas we don't have anything. So it's very difficult, and you have to tiptoe almost around certain things in order to make sure that you're not breaching some sort of hate law or non-crime hate incident.
Right.
It's just silly.
Well, they're trying to bring these back again. I read today
Yeah.
that the Starmer regime wants to increase the
Expand.
number of non-crime hate incidents again, which are completely pointless, to be honest. But also, yeah, you're absolutely right. We have all of these laws about hatred, which they don't have in the United States.
No.
And there's stirring up hatred, there's hate speech, whatever that is. It's not properly defined. And then there's, writing things which are grossly offensive, which again is not properly defined. But we have a lot of political prisoners now. I suppose arguably the most well-known one is Lucy Connolly, because she was the wife of a Conservative councillor, and who wrote at the time something it wasn't pleasant. She said something like, "I don't care if migrants staying in migrant hotels die. I don't care." She did, but she wasn't inciting violence. She just says, "I don't care if something happens to them," which is not pleasant. But it's not something that she should be put in prison for. But she's in prison for nearly 3 years for something that, if she'd said that in the United States, no one would even, bat an eyelid.
No.
And she certainly wouldn't be arrested and dragged through the courts. So I think something has to happen with the law here.
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be a real overhaul. I mean, I watch a lot of I don't know if you've seen the guy's content, Black Belt Barrister.
Yes.
He does a lot of stuff covering a lot of cases and goes through the documentation and explains, from a legal perspective, all of this. And even he posted something this morning that I was reading. He was explaining how the system just needs an overhaul and a look at. Because it's criminal, really, that people are being put away, or in the opposite, people being given lenient sentences for things such as harboring thousands of child abuse images and stuff like this. And this seems to be becoming very common now through the justice system. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what memos are being passed around, but it's got to stop. It's got to be overhauled. We've got to take a look at this and take it seriously.
I would never have imagined, when I was growing up, that in England, the United Kingdom, that something like this would happen, that you could get more time in prison for saying something on social media than you could do for having, let's say, pictures of children and babies on your phone. I have to put it that way because I have to be careful about what words I use, but you understand what I mean. The justice system is completely inverted from what it should be. And I think people are looking at the UK now from other countries. I suppose the most well-known person is Elon Musk, because he's been tweeting about this, and he's been tweeting about, or posting, I should say now, because it's X, not Twitter, but posting about grooming gangs. And a lot of people are just looking at the UK and saying, what on earth is going on with your country? You were the home of freedom and democracy, like, hundreds of years ago or more. But now you just, it's beyond a joke. It's just, deplorable.
Yeah.
People are just looking aghast at this country and saying, what on earth is happening here?
We should be the beaming light, the shining example, from the Magna Carta all the way through. And we just aren't anymore. We've become the vassal state of America, but without the amendments. And it's dreadful. It's just dreadful. So something needs to change. Something radical politically within Parliament needs to happen. We need a leader to come through and to deliver change. And unfortunately, I just don't see that for a long, long time still. But anything can happen. Politics is a very dirty game. but also things can happen very quickly. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that something does happen, and just got to remember that, you know, God is sovereign with this. So we just have to take heed in that.
Well, I'm doing my best, Lewis. There it is, to create an alternative that would turn this around. But you know, I think we do have the things in this country which are embedded. We have a constitution. See, people are often lied to that we don't have a constitution because we don't have a technical document where everything's in one place. We have Magna Carta, we have the Act of Settlement, we have the Bill of Rights, we have common law, which is the understanding of what we should use in law. But these things have been suppressed by cultural Marxist laws which have come into, or statutes which have come in that sit on top of them, and people, you know, judges go, oh, you know, there's the Human Rights Act, there's the Equality Act, there's stirring up hatred. All these things are in statute, but they're repugnant to the Constitution, the foundations of our nation. So, you know, I think we need to get back to what we've got already in law before, particularly from the time of Tony Blair onwards.
Yes.
It's just messed up the nation, the structure of the nation, the things that people don't think about too much in their everyday life, but, you know, messing with Parliament, messing with the judiciary, messing with how laws are interpreted. And that is, you know, a big problem, if not the whole problem, is that there's actually been almost a cultural Marxist communist revolution in this country, which has changed the laws that we have by putting things that are repugnant on top of what should be there. And we need to get rid of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, they say that the long march through the institutions, it's already happened. The revolution is done. And now we're seeing the effects of it. You know, all we just need to do is just repeal back so much Tony Blair legislation, because that's where it's all coming from the Communications Act of 2003 to the Equalities Act of 2010. You know, it derives from. So
maybe we need a great repeal. I mean, repeal not everything, but almost everything, going back to 1997.
Yes,
you know,
I agree. Yeah, the Great Repeal sounds a good, like, solid, you know, manifesto almost. And
maybe that's all we need. Just have a real reset, have an English reset or a British reset. Go back to 1997 and then just get rid of all of this junk that has come in, and then we can get back to sanity. I don't know. Maybe that's it. Look, before we go, I do want to ask you about something else, which is a related issue, which is the whole grooming gangs issue, which has come. People are talking about this as well, which needs to be spoken about, because it's been going on for 40 years and it's been covered up for that time, and still. You've got Keir Starmer now saying that if you're concerned about this, you're jumping on a far-right bandwagon, again, smearing people who are concerned for the welfare of girls in the same way as it was people were smeared back in the 2000s and the 2010s. And you interviewed Sammy Woodhouse, who was a victim of grooming gangs in Rotherham. You spoke to her. You know, how was that interview? What did you pick up from that, you know, about what we can do about this?
Well, firstly, Sammy Woodhouse is incredibly brave, an incredibly brave woman. So I travelled up to Rotherham very recently to do a docu-report for a Dutch company called Ongehoord, or it means the unheard. And we spent 2 hours together where she shared her story, and it's a horrific story, full of corruption and negligence from the police, the council, the government, everything. She gave her view on this current government as well, which, you know, we can all guess her views on that, of course. But it was an insight into just how deep the corruption actually goes, and how even all of this corruption it's just the tip of the iceberg of just how deep rooted all of this is. So I traveled to Rotherham, and as you know, It's one of the biggest. It's known as the capital, with the biggest child abuse scandal in the UK, where over 1,400 girls were systematically raped and tortured by predominantly Pakistani heritage men, and predominantly the victims being of white working class girls between the years of 97 and 2013. Although this problem still continues today, it's not been buried, it's not gone. You know, it hasn't reached a conclusion. It continues.
So it's 1,400 victims up to 2013, but that was 12 years ago.
Yes.
There may be 1,000 more, thousands
Could be.
more.
Sarah Champion, the Labour MP of Rotherham, she explained in the Daily Mirror that she was having at least 10 victims come to her a week at one point.
Wow.
And she was afraid that the number of child abuse victims in the UK, in Britain, could reach up to 1 million. And this was, you know, Sarah Champion 10 years ago. So, you know, and these problems just don't go away. We haven't had adequate justice. We haven't seen a single institutional officer or someone from the council who, you know, chose not to disclose or to report on these horrific cases because of fears of being called a racist or a xenophobe or you know, all of these ists and isms, and which has led to the systematic abuse of children over decades, since as far back as the 1970s, really, if you want to go back that far. So it was a very gloomy day, and you know, we went around Rotherham and looked at you know, places to which the story of her abuse happened, and pointed to places in which it did happen. Which was very, very horrific. So for her to be as brave as that, to walk me through not just the abuse and what happened, but actually show me where the abuse happened as well. It was a very heavy day, but I'm hoping the report should be out hopefully February 4th. I'm hoping it's that. So we still got some time. However, when it does come out, I'm hoping it will be posted on X. And yeah, it's an important yet dark report that needs to be shared.
Well, I'll certainly share that, you know, and repost it. I think that's something everybody needs to hear. And it sounds it's going to be very, very powerful. And, you know, we just need to make this stop because, you know, as a lot of people are saying, it's still going on today. It hasn't been properly dealt with. And, you know, what I'm concerned about is that there are people who are in positions of power who were at the time in power, but are still in power, including police officers, including councillors, maybe including MPs, who are actually in the gangs or doing some of these crimes that the gangs do, and they need to be in jail, and they can't be left in a position of power where they can block justice for the victims of these grooming gangs, rape gangs. They need to be sorted out. It's a horrible thing. Anyway, Lewis, thank you so much for joining me. You know, these are really tough topics to deal with, and it's horrific that this is happening in the UK. We've got this migrant crimes, mass murder, and grooming gangs, and people just don't know what's going on. We don't expect this to be happening in England, which is, you know, when I was growing up, England was known as a wonderful, safe, happy country to be, but it isn't that anymore. And it's been attacked from inside. We need to recognize that, and so we can deal with it and hopefully set things right again somehow. Lewis, thank you so much for joining me and talking about all these things.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. You take care.
Thank you. And thank you also for you listening and viewing this, the David Kurten Show today. I hope you're well, and that we can all work together to make this country better and restore our nation once again. Thank you.